Hello and welcome to the latest Greater Birmingham Chambers of Commerce Q&A. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Carl Potter and Daryl Perry from Avison Young. Now, Carl, you're a familiar figure around Birmingham, but can you maybe just tell us a little bit about the organisation and all that you are involved in, both here in Birmingham and also nationally?
Yeah, okay. So Avison Young is a global real estate advisory business. We create real economic, social and environmental value through the advice we provide. And we recognise the importance of the communities that we work within. We are really, Paul, in our own words, powered by people. And our office in Birmingham is the largest regional office we have in the UK. It's got a workforce of about 400 employees operating from our HQ in Brindley Place, as well as an office in Coventry, which makes us quite spread across the Midlands. We've got really firm roots in Birmingham though, and we're recognised as the leading property consultant in the region with more than 200 years in the market. That doesn't necessarily mean that just because we've been around for 200 years, it makes us solid, but we are, as an organisation, very dynamic as well. And we've got a really strong roster across the patch, working with leading private, public and education clients. And just to give you a flavour of some of the current projects we're involved in, we've just finished completing the developer selection work for the University of Birmingham. We've chosen Bruntwood SciTech as their development partner for the Life Sciences Park. We're doing an enormous amount of work for Birmingham City Council. We're doing a strategic review at the moment in respect of their investment property portfolio, which has got in excess of 5,000 assets within it. We're helping them with the regeneration of the Ladywood area, which is trying to position itself with a net new addition of around about 4,000 to 5,000 new residential units. And we're providing advice to the city on the Perry Bar regeneration post 2022 Commonwealth Games. And out into the private sector, we're acting for IM Properties on their 2 million square feet logistics scheme at Peddymore in Sutton Coldfield. And we're acting for Argent and Hermes in the city centre in respect to the development of Paradise. Hammerson, one of our clients, where we're advising on the funding for Martineau Galleries. And similarly, we're advising U&I in respect of their joint venture with Calthorpe at New Garden Square. So that just gives you a flavour for the sort of stuff we've been doing.
An awful lot of activity going on there. And I mean, just from that local perspective, I mean, have you seen things slow down during the COVID pandemic or really has a lot carried on at a good rate of knots? And I mean, that's we know about the renaissance that's been taking place in Birmingham, certainly in the sort of prior to March hitting, and the amount of development is what's made the city so exciting to be around. But have you seen it slow down at all or not?
Yeah, there has without doubt been a slowdown, particularly in transactional parts of the market. So occupier demand for offices is down. And the retail sector was already hit before the pandemic started, and that's accelerated the difficulties in that sector. But looking positively, the industrial side and the logistics side has been booming to a large extent. As we go through this total reconfiguration of our economy towards e-commerce, towards new ways of e-tailing, etc., there's been a huge boom in the demand for logistics, and that continues as that market probably hasn't really started to mature yet, Paul. It's in its infancy. It's changing, and the requirements of the occupiers keep on changing. That's fueling demand.
Yeah, there's so much sort of change taking place, and it's actually great you mentioned the sort of history and heritage there of the company. But as another organisation which is over 200 years old, it's great that that we can come together today and be talking about what the future holds. Now, I mean, one thing we particularly wanted to focus on, I'm just going to bring Daryl in here, is the Avison Young, the UK Cities Recovery Index that you've been producing. And Daryl, so you're head of UK research for Avison Young. Can you tell us a little bit about the index, and then maybe we'll sort of bring it down to a sort of a Birmingham and West Midlands level?
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. So essentially the idea for the Cities Recovery Index really came in the middle of March. So we'd just been sent home as a business, which probably only going to be 2 to 3 weeks. No more, I'm sure. We were certainly sure at the time.
Little did we know, hey?
Well,
Yeah.
absolutely. But the pandemic was already spreading. I guess around then we were seeing kind of stock markets plummet. And it was clear, as Carl said, that our markets were really changing in a significant way. Construction halted in a number of cases. And interestingly, at that time, we were just about coming to a quarter end, which I think really maybe illustrated the situation a little bit more. So obviously rents were about to be collected or not, as would actually happen. But from a research perspective, we were about to take really, I guess, our first view of the market for 2020. So looking at it from a quarterly perspective. And we essentially looked at each other, and via Zoom, of course, and realized that any analysis that we were going to do wasn't irrelevant, but it was probably out of date before we would even start writing it and looking at the markets. So what we decided and realized that we needed to do was actually get up to speed quite quickly, not on what's happening in our markets on a even kind of a monthly or even a weekly basis. It was essentially monitoring them really daily. So I don't know if you'll remember, but one of the things that we saw at the time, China was obviously ahead of us in its dealings with the pandemic, but we started seeing a number of, I guess, high frequency economic indicators coming out of China, really charting the recovery there. Well, first the downturn and then the recovery. So we started doing the same. So we started looking at, say, footfall, flight data, even nitrogen dioxide levels, which is quite interesting. And we started reporting this and using this with our clients. But what we realized was that, I guess, that only tells one part of the story. Footfall is one element. And what we decided that I guess we could and should be doing is trying to start building a bit of a framework for how we track the recovery. So this wasn't really about kind of tracking or kind of recreating, a proxy for GDP or looking at a new way of measuring real estate. What we were trying to do really is understand the diversity of our cities and really the speed and trajectory of the recovery. So it was all about understanding really the drivers but behind our cities and property itself. So where we could, we captured, I guess, real-time data. So daily, weekly, if we could get our hands of it, we'd capture minute by minute data, anything we could really get. And what we did was actually capture tens of thousands of data points and start feeding them in an automated way, probably working smarter than we've ever done before. And what we focused really initially on our big 9 cities, so Birmingham, but Bristol, Cardiff, Glasgow, Edinburgh, Liverpool, Leeds, Manchester, and Newcastle, and then London and the UK as a whole. And what we did then is broke those cities down by 6 sectors. So we got 6 sector indices, looked at the economy in terms of commercial activity, hotel and leisure, mobility, so that's people just moving around, and then residential, retail, and I guess the one which is particularly interesting, maybe some, the return to office.
And I mean, how has it evolved then over the period? And what has it sort of shown as well? I suppose it's sort of fascinating to see common trends and also then the different regional differences, which I guess will be exacerbated by the fact that, for example, Cardiff, it's operating under a different set of rules, isn't it, as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And Cardiff has been a fascinating, I don't want to use this flippantly, but I guess it's an interesting test case for what will happen to the rest of certainly English cities as we go into as we've entered lockdown. I think in terms of the general trajectory of the recovery index, in a way, it's kind of really telling you what you probably feel. We really saw, I guess, a bit of a motoring of the recovery in July, as we were, Super Saturday, as England was allowed to open its shops, its pubs, its hairdressers, all of the important parts of the economy. As that was happening, we saw the recovery index really speed along. That was then kind of increased again in August. We saw a number of staycations. We saw the Eat Out to Help Out scheme that really powered along the recovery and was very successful in a number of cities. And people were starting to, if not go back to normality, at least trying to do as much as possible. Where I guess we were hoping we would see that step up again was in September, and we were hoping that the return to schools would see a return to work. That never materialized. The government changed its views on and its guidance on kind of people working, and obviously we've seen a stagnation first, and then a gentle coming down of the recovery index. Obviously in Cardiff that's been accelerated somewhat.
So it's a question for both of you, but maybe sort of Carl, just trying to get that Birmingham flavour again. I know that initially Birmingham was outperforming the pack, wasn't it really, in terms of a number of the indices of economic recovery? But you know, what are we seeing now, or you know, and how has that sort of changed, as it were?
So there's been some changes, as you can understand, all over the time. So originally the recovery index for Birmingham was tracking well ahead of the national index. And to be fair, it has done since May. Although there's been a 3% fallback over the past week across the board. But Birmingham still stands at 81.3 as of the 8th of November, compared to a national index of 75.1. So we're still well ahead of the pack. And Birmingham is generally faring well. What we need to do though is drill down into specific sector indices.
Yeah.
We're really, really strong on residential and commercial activity. So just to give you a flavour for commercial activity, Birmingham at the moment is at an index of 110.5 on the 8th of November. So that shows a very strong recovery. And it's been a sustained high level of business confidence that's put upward pressure on that sector index. And it's the sentiment that's reflected in the substantial levels of industrial leasing activity that I talked about before. Residential, Birmingham's got a really strong score in this sector, and it has ever since we started the index. It's now at a near high of 122.3 as of the 8th of November. And, you know, if you look at what the market's telling us elsewhere, the RICS residential market survey tells us that Birmingham's seeing a really high volume of new buyer inquiries, and that's complementing sustained demand for good quality residential property in the city. So these sales rates are generating strong price inflation, and we predict the city's healthy residential performance will continue. And to us, it's clear that the city's optimism and grit is really alive. And from our clients, equally, we're experienced a resolve of mind and seeing them take a really strong can-do attitude and approach to ensuring development activity isn't stalled. But on the flip side, you know, Birmingham has always benefited from a really strong tourism sector, and it's the lack of tourism that is really, really affecting our hotel and leisure sector. So that is, you know, one that's failing to pick up in Birmingham, along with the return to office sector. And to be fair, you know, Birmingham went into tier 2. We saw a downturn in the RTO, or return to office, as a consequence of that.
So, you know, as you say, it's all about balance, isn't it? And there's areas which, and it's encouraging to have that sort of quantified and to hear, you know, and to remind yourself sometimes of, you know, areas which are performing well. And we're seeing that with a lot of members actually who are saying that, you know what, it's not quite as bad as we'd thought, or they're thriving. At the same time, others, you know, we know are really, really suffering. But, you know, what are the other key drivers, do you think, that are helping us outside of just that grit and resilience? Are there sort of certain factors as to why we would be performing so strongly on commercial and residential, do you think? What sort of analysis do you draw from that? Or is that just a sort of a continuing legacy of what we've been seeing, you know, in the years building up to spring?
Yeah, it's part of the, you know, the economic makeup and performance of the city. So I'll start off and then bring in Daryl in a moment. But if we look at Birmingham's core city businesses, we're really heavily populated by professional and financial services. And those businesses are much more able to adapt and continue to trade remotely for a sustained period. So that could be a reason as well why we're slower on the return to office recovery.
Yeah, and picking up on that point that Carl made on the return to office sector, I think it's an interesting thing to think about. And obviously we have to remember that Birmingham is such a large city, you know, and it has excellent public transport infrastructure. You know, it relies on a significant catchment area. And what we've seen is that actually other large cities, Manchester and London, are in a similar boat in terms of if a city is very reliant on kind of public transport for people coming in and out of work, that does make things a little bit more difficult. So it's kind of you know, what's normally a blessing is a curse in this case. In smaller cities, people might be more likely to drive to work. And I'm just picking up on this kind of this return to office thread a little bit as well. Because I think what you have to remember is that the government's guidance since September really has been quite clear on working from home. You know, if you can, and you know, that's been emphasized again since we've been in lockdown. And I think that point that Carl made around resilience is very kind of interesting. Birmingham has shown resilience. And I think on the return to the office element, I think it's probably quite a show of strength going forward. And I think it's interesting that where people, I guess, have been in work, and maybe they were doing just one or 2 days a week, but where they have been able to do that and where they're comfortable, and it isn't for everyone by any stretch of the imagination, but where that has happened, they have maybe continued to do that because, you know, it's good for their mental health. They want to be in a good workplace. They want to see their colleagues, albeit, you know, it's kind of, it's not for everyone, but it's good to see that resilience really.
And I mean, just asking you to sort of, you know, look into your crystal balls. I mean, what are your views on the future of the office, as it were? And I know, you know, it's a topic which comes up a lot. You know, people throw it around, and fact is clearly no one knows exactly. But at the same time, you know, there's so much change taking place. You alluded to it earlier, Carl. But what's both of your sort of take on that? What will it be looking like in 6 months or 12 months? You know, once, you know, the vaccine program is hopefully sort of, you know, fully rolled out. You know, do you sort of see there being a massive change as a result of what we're all going through now, or will things sort of spring back to how they were pre-COVID by and large?
I think, yeah, pre-COVID, Paul, we were on a journey anyway. So in the same way that the retail market was changing, the offices market was changing quite significantly. And we'd moved away from, you know, the traditional office of cellularization, then to open plan. And you know, more recently, it's been about agile working and efficiency ratios. So a lot of businesses have 6 or 8 desks for every 10 people. Nobody owns their own desk. They move around the office. And that's driven, you know, both business and cost efficiencies quite well. What we've seen is an acceleration of that agility, you know, a mass working from home experiment. And what will come out of that will be a realization by a lot of businesses that working from home is an option that they either can, might, or should encourage their staff to participate in. For an employee, yeah, outside of lockdown and outside of 100% working from home, yeah, it gives people a much better work-life balance. So what we're going to do as we come out of this, and it's not going to be in a 6 or 12 month period, it's going to be a sort of 12, 24, 36 months, and it will continue. So we will have people, and our clients are already telling us this, who are working 2 or 3 days from the office and 2 or 3 days from home. Now that's an acceleration from what might have been previously 4 days in the office, 1 day at home type scenario. There will be jobs that will be 100% work from home, or maybe 1 day in the office, 4 days at home. So you come back and touching base. But you know, the key to this really is that, you know, what is the office for? What does it do? And people will only work from an office in the future when there is a reason for doing so. So what's the to go into the office. What are you doing there? What do you have to be there to do that is different from what you can do at home? And a lot of that is really about the innovation, the spur of the moment conversations, the discussions that you have with colleagues that just aren't the same over Zoom or remotely. And I keep harking back to this example, but if you watch Have I Got News for You in a Zoom type environment, it just doesn't work. Yeah, it's so stilted. You don't get those people bouncing ideas off each other very quickly. You don't get the wit, you don't get the repertoire or the responses. And that's, very similar to what we're experiencing.
That's the human experience, isn't it?
Absolutely right.
Yeah. And I suppose it's so important as well for just the vibrancy of the city centre, isn't it? It's not just getting back into offices, it's everything.
If you look at city centres, it's all about reinventing the high street, which is about creating footfall in other ways that are not specifically just retail. So it's about getting people into city centres, keeping them vibrant. And a lot of local authorities and a lot of landowners were looking at the office sector to supplement footfall. Now, you only have to look across the city centres now and you look at the difference in footfall in Edgbaston compared to Brindley Place, compared to the Bullring and the High Street, New Street area. These are very, very different and changing environments at the moment. So the way in which we reinvigorate our towns and city centres in the future has to be done really holistically, not just looking at why is retail failing, but what is it that can supplement that? And what is the reason why people are going into the city centres? What is it they're trying to do? And how do you elongate that dwell time when they're there?
And so has this experience, and I guess the development of the recovery index, then sort of improved your understanding and ability to then input and the granularity of information that you have? Daryl, you highlighted the amount of data that you've been gathering. Is that a positive that we'll take from COVID, that actually, that understanding of the different areas and how they're going to recover and what they need is now far more advanced than it was beforehand? Or is it a case that, no, we already always had that data?
I think from a data perspective, I guess we've been on a bit of a journey in terms of, understanding kind of big data and what we can capture and what that tells us. In terms of what we're actually seeing, I think Carl again makes an excellent point around kind of, the mobility and the movements we've seen in areas such as Edgbaston, kind of relatively suburban locations outside of city centres, where on some measures we've actually seen, above 100. So like recovery, mobility and movement well in excess of what we would consider normal. Now, as Carl pointed out, there's elements of benefit where actually that needs to be thought about in the long term, whether that's by local authorities or whether that's by businesses themselves, and thinking about, okay, what can we capture that's kind of good about this situation that actually benefits our cities, our local town sectors in the future. You will have heard about this kind of work near home concept. Is that idea, Carl already said about where people want to work, but that we're hearing a lot more from our clients about this potential of an idea. Well, I might want to work from home. I'll certainly want to work in the office, but actually I could do with a little bit of a journey, which is a bit closer, where I want to meet up with my team who might live nearby. And that has, the potential upside benefits for not only kind of local economies, but, local businesses, local retailers, as Carl said.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how it develops. So, and if people watching want to find out more about the recovery index, what's the best or easiest way for them to do that? What would you advise?
It's on the website.
And what we'll do is we'll make sure that there's a link included here, but if there's follow-up questions or they want to sort of dig in further, can they reach out to you?
Absolutely. Please get in touch. We're presenting to clients. We're keen to talk about this. A colleague of mine, global head of research, Nick Axford is talking at the West Midlands Forum for Growth in the coming weeks. We are out talking about this. There's plenty of analysis and data behind it. So if you do want to get in touch, please do.
Great. And then just a final sort of thought from you both. And I'm going to sort of bring it selfishly onto Birmingham. I mean, what's your views on the prospects for the recovery for the city? Do you sort of think we will emerge sort of flying out of this and ready to get back on track, or are we going to be disproportionately impacted by COVID? And I guess you mentioned about the index perform, where we're sort of trending slightly above, which is optimistic, but do you think that will carry through as we get into 2021, as we hopefully emerge from the nightmare that has been 2020?
Again, Paul, I'll kick off, and I'll let Daryl give you an overview of where he feels Birmingham's going. It's going to be mixed, is the answer. We're going to see certain areas continue to prosper and grow. But I think what you have to remember is Birmingham has spent decades building up its tourism and the supply chain to that tourism, which is an amazing selection of Michelin-star restaurants and high-quality eateries around the city. That could be decimated by this. I only hope that those restaurants that have struggled so hard to establish themselves, those chefs who've worked so hard to open up the quality restaurants that we have, survive and can continue to prosper as we come out of this. Because Birmingham's reputation on a global field has been really underpinned by everything that we offer in the entertainment industry, through the ICC, Symphony Hall, the NEC, etc. Our theatres, the Rep and the Hippodrome are all world class. And we must make sure that we survive by helping those guys survive. Those are the things that really underpin this city. And it's really important that if we are to continue as a major centre of commerce and attracting in major inward investors, as we have been so successful in doing recently, that we get that cultural offering absolutely right as we recover.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I mean, I would hope that, things like the Commonwealth Games and HS2, which, we know is so important, maybe two particular sort of things that are taking place that might give us that slight head start over others, because the Commonwealth Games is only going to be Birmingham on the T-shirt, even though we know it is taking place over a wider geography, and HS2 is, will benefit the whole country, but fundamentally we're at the heart of it. And Daryl, just any final thoughts from you?
Really just kind of picking up on Carl's point. I think he's right to mention kind of good places to eat. And I think what we saw during the summer about people trying to get out and about, visit their kind of local shops, visit kind of good quality, desirable, pleasant parts of the city, like Brindley Place, where you have that open space and that excellent food provision. I think we've seen some real increases in footfall, around Brindley Place and other areas, which is all very positive. You will have seen some, I guess, relatively negative economic projections around the West Midlands going forward, which focus on the manufacturing, which is an issue. But I think there's also elements where maybe there is scope for positivity. We've seen, the Midlands generally is a very strong manufacturing hub for the UK, and generally it's certainly an incredibly it's certainly at the heart from a transport and distribution perspective. That has changed immeasurably. We've seen some real issues and changes in the way kind of supply chains work. We're already seeing examples of kind of nearshoring or reshoring. So there's some real strength potentially to come on that side. I certainly don't think that should just be a negative story. But just to go back to finish really with the point Carl made, Birmingham's an excellent city, and where there is a positivity, I think positivity comes from the fact that people are using their localities, using their neighborhoods in ways they perhaps haven't done ever before, or certainly haven't done for even generations. And the idea of that being captured going forward, as we go back to normality, I think that's something to be very, very optimistic about.
Yeah, no, well, look, Daryl, Carl, thank you for joining us. It's a sort of fascinating conversation. As you say, and it's nice to get that balance in there, because I think that certainly reflects the reality. And the Avison Young, the Cities Recovery Index is a brilliant tool. As I say, the links here, you can find it on your site as well. And if people haven't had a chance to take a look at it yet, then we would certainly recommend that. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks.